come together to fix it. We do talk about how we're putting this debt on our children and our grandchildren. I want to tell you the time is on us right now. The bill is coming due. We're facing the most predictable crisis in our nation's history with our current financial situation. It's a problem we can all see and we can all acknowledge must be fixed. Of course, acting is not as easy as talking. If it were that easy, we wouldn't be so far in debt. For some time, we've been talking about reining in spending and making sure that our grandchildren aren't saddled with the enormous debt the country is facing. Now we're facing the reality of reaching the debt ceiling, a cap that has increased to $14 trillion. That's trillion with 12 zeros. More than $2 trillion over the previous debt limit of $12 trillion, just a little over a year ago in February of 2010. We've raised the debt ceiling 74 times since 1962, and we've raised the limit 10 times since 2001. But listen to this. In the last 4 years, we've raised the debt ceiling 5 times. It's accelerating. What does this tell us about our spending habits? The numbers don't lie. It tells us that we've had to raise the debt ceiling to keep up with increased federal spending. It tells us we've forgotten entirely how to live within our means. It tells us we need to make serious decisions about cutting federal spending. And we need to make those decisions now. We've all been talking about it. Republicans have come to the Senate floor and talked about the country's financial future. They've talked about our debt, projections for the future, and agreed the path is unsustainable. Republican and Democratic administrations and Congresses for decades have continually increased federal spending. No one party holds all the blame for the situation we're in. But clearly the road we are traveling on is leading to a crisis. Last week, the president held a press conference where he lectured Republican members of Congress. He told us that we need to stay in Washington to get things done. After listening to his press conference, we invited the president to meet with Senate Republicans. We hope to explain to the president that the political reality makes it so that a bill containing tax increases cannot pass the House or the Senate. After lecturing us about the need to be in Washington and the need to get our work done, one would assume that the president would take us up on our offer to meet. Instead, his spokesperson said, meeting with Senate Republicans was, quote, not a conversation worth having, end quote. Rather than staying in Washington to work on the debt and deficit, the president chose to fly to a fundraiser in Philadelphia. Republicans have been engaged in efforts to fix the debt and deficit since the election last fall. House Republicans passed a serious budget that would cut $6 2/10 trillion over the next decade. Not enough, but substantial. After demagoguing the Ryan budget as an effort to kill Medicare and push grandma off a cliff, Senate Democrats have yet to bring any budget to the floor. I heard just a few minutes ago that they're being considered, but it's being considered in a very partisan way, and I don't know if we'll get to see it before it comes to the floor. But we've gone 800 days without passing any sort of budget. Even though the media reported that Senate Democrats have reached a budget agreement, they still haven't brought the budget to the floor or shared it with Republicans. Why? I can only assume it's because it includes trillions of dollars in tax increases that would be unpalatable to the majority of Americans. Now, the president presented a budget, and we voted on that budget. In fact, it was voted on 0 to 97. The president couldn't get a single vote for his budget. Now, I didn't see that in many headlines, but it happened. Check on it. While Democrats continue to ignore the problem, Republicans look for solutions. All 47 Senate Republicans have signed on as co-sponsors of a constitutional amendment to balance the budget. Senator Toomey and Senator Paul put forward their own budget efforts that would balance the budget. I've introduced legislation that creates two-year budgeting and other legislation that would reduce spending by 1% each year for 7 years until we balance the budget. If Congress can't reduce spending by a single percentage point each year, it basically has given up and decided to leave this huge and growing pile of debt to tower over our children and our grandchildren and us, casting a grand shadow over their future and ours. I remember hearing that we had in the Finance Committee, and pretty much what everybody said was, quit digging. You're in a big hole, quit digging. And Phil Gramm talked on taxes and said, don't penalize America with a tax every time that Congress fails to do its job, which is to balance the budget, to spend reasonably. Failure on Congress's part doesn't warrant taxing Americans. So where do we go from here? Republicans are ready to work, but we need Democrats to work with us. We need the president to take a realistic look at the situation and realize that tax increases are not the answer because the votes aren't there to pass a tax increase. We need to come up with a solution to the budget crisis we face, and we need to do it now. If we're serious about fixing the problem, excuse me, and I believe many of us are, we have to come to the table willing to work. We have to stop pointing fingers. We have to stop playing political games. We have to stop demagoguing ideas that are proposed.
Just put it on the floor here.
We need the president to step up to the plate and explain to the American people the problem we face if we don't get our debt and deficit under control, and then to give the solutions, not just tax raises. The president's the only person in the nation who has the bully pulpit necessary to teach the American people what happens if we don't get a budget and don't get timely appropriations. The president's talked about some of the taxes that he would increase. The Deficit Commission suggested that those taxes could be used, but they suggested that they should be used to lower company rates so that we can compete internationally, which would increase revenues. They didn't suggest that they should be used to pay for new programs. They're not even being suggested to reduce the deficit. Now, rather than taking the lead and selling a plan, the president has tried to stay above the fray and instead spent his time criticizing Republicans who have come up with a variety of plans. That isn't productive. It isn't helpful. It won't lead to a deal. We need to end the finger pointing and show the plan. Show us the plan. Bipartisanship is not really about compromise. Say that again. Bipartisanship is not really about compromise. It's about what you leave out or finding an alternate way to accomplish a mutually agreeable goal. I know it works. I've seen it happen. The late Senator Ted Kennedy and I were able to put this theory into practice when we worked together on health, education, labor, and pensions. He and I came from opposite sides on most issues, but we chose to focus our time and energy on what we knew we could get done. It amazed people, but we sure got results. All in all, when Senator Kennedy and I led the HELP Committee, we got 35 bills reported out of committee and 27 signed into law. These kinds of results are possible today, but we have to really get to work. We can't just keep raising the debt ceiling. We can't just tax more every time we have a good idea. We have to address the spending problem in Washington, and we have to figure out some solutions to correct our long-term budget outlook. These aren't easy issues to address. Excuse me. But we've been sent here to do a job, and that job includes rolling up our sleeves and finding a way out of the mess. We're here through this July recess, but we're still not doing anything that's proactive, productive. The Democrats are the Senate majority. They control the floor. Yesterday we did a nothing vote to see if everybody was back. We want to vote. We won't vote until tomorrow now. And it's just a political ploy put up by the leader. It's messaging, and messaging won't pay the bills. Let's get something done this session. I yield the floor.